People who left their partner on the day of the wedding. What happened? Story 1. My cousin's backyard shotgun wedding. She changed her mind because they got into a fight that morning. My uncle still made barbecue, and it just turned into a typical family hangout. They got married the next weekend anyway. Not a very exciting story. They're still married 22 years and 3 kids later, though, so that's something. Story 2. We called it the non-wedding. It was a very small backyard event, and when we showed up, a relative of the groom ushered us out back and whispered that the wedding was off, but they had all this food, so we should help ourselves. Apparently, that very morning the groom found out the bride had hooked up with the stripper at her bachelorette party, but his family said they had already spent all the money on the party, so they'd just tell people as they arrived. It was one of the most awkward experiences of my life because the groom just sat dejectedly in a chair while people tried to cheer him up. We ate a little out of obligation and then got the hell out of there. Story 3. A friend's story that has always stuck with me. It happened in the early 70s. In LA, he gave a ride to 2 girls hitchhiking and struck up a friendship with them. He went through the whole thing of dating, and after a year, she moved in with him. They planned the wedding, and his family came from Detroit. Everything was happening as planned. Both families and friends were seated, the procession was complete, and the wedding march started. But the church doors didn't open. After some awkward moments, the door opened, and only her father was standing there. He said, "Sorry, she had to use the bathroom. It'll be a minute." After a while, her mother went to check on her. She was nowhere to be found, but they did find her wedding dress back at their apartment. He was devastated. He said he sat there on the altar steps waiting. When he learned about the dress, he and his best man went on the honeymoon anyway and stayed drunk the entire time. By the time he returned, all her things were gone. No note, no communication, nothing. She had just completely disappeared. 18 months later, she showed up at his doorstep, crying and apologizing, asking him to marry her. He said, "Closing that door in her face without saying a word was a great moment in my life. By that time, I didn't care and had moved on." He was such a great guy and lived a full life with some massive twists, like being left at the altar. He was a Navy SEAL who once woke up in a body bag in Vietnam because they thought he was dead. After recovering, he came back stateside and was driving to his first day at a job polishing marble at a stone company. But when he parked, he just couldn't get out of the car. He went home, and his mom said a friend had just called. His friend's band had signed with Motown, and they wanted him to join them in LA. He became a backup and harmony singer for Rare Earth, the 70s band known for Get Ready and I Just Want to Celebrate, the first white rock band signed to Motown. He was a good friend. We had fun, did some business together, and I still miss him. Story 4. A friend and coworker. His family is from Europe and owns some estates. She's from Kentucky. Families flew in from around the world to this island estate for a week of celebrations. They got married by the family's priest in the family's church, followed by a huge reception. His family must have spent $1 million. At the end of the reception, they flew to Spain for the first stop of their honeymoon. The next morning, he went out onto the balcony and whistled to the flower vendor in the plaza to bring flowers up. He shouted out the room number and then jumped in the shower. She, not understanding, went out and saw 3 women walking across the plaza. She thought he had whistled at them and given out his room number. She packed her bags, stormed out, and left him in the hotel. He came out of the shower to find her gone and the flower guy asking for money. He paid the guy and assumed she was getting something from the front desk. A half hour later, he realized his phone was missing, and so was her luggage. He called his brother to call his phone and then to call her. She ignored the calls. He eventually got her mom on the phone, and she cussed him out for supposedly whistling at the women. He tried to explain, but her mom called him a cheater. He never saw her again. No divorce was needed because the marriage certificate was never filed. She kept the rings, including his grandmother's diamond, and even posted the wedding pictures on her social media. But when he got back to the US, she had moved out of their shared housing and was gone. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard. They were married for less than 18 hours, and they spent 2 years in lawsuits over those wedding and engagement rings. Story 5. I remember when I was a kid, I had an aunt who had been dating a guy for a few years and had planned a huge wedding. He was all right. I remember them taking me out a few times to play family, and he was nice. I don't recall all the details because I've learned more of the story as an adult when my family talks about it. But I do remember having a suit ready, doing the rehearsal, going to the church, and everything. So this must have happened just a few days before the actual wedding day, if not the day before. My aunt decided to call off the wedding because she had never met the guy's mother, and even up until the week before the big day, she still hadn't been able to meet her. From what I understand, the mother-in-law didn't like her and went out of her way to avoid meeting her, despite never having met her in person. It was one of those situations where the overbearing mother thinks no one is good enough for her son and will make the fiancé's life miserable. My aunt felt disrespected and said she wasn't going to marry him unless she met his mother first and made peace with her. The wedding didn't happen, and they lost basically all the money for the hotel and party since the food couldn't be canceled anymore. I vividly remember having tons of food delivered to my aunt's house and my family splitting it up into containers so we could all take some home. I also remember flowers absolutely everywhere for weeks because we all had to split those too. They did end up getting married a few months later. No idea what happened with the mother-in-law, but I think they made peace. This time, it was a smaller ceremony at my aunt's house instead of the big wedding that had been planned. They're still married, have a 16-year-old kid, pets, and a home, and as far as I know, they're happy. The last time I heard about any issues was over a decade ago, and it was just the usual marriage stuff. Story 6. My sister's wedding, or rather, the wedding that never happened. 2 weeks before the big day, during his bachelor party, SHE flew to another state to get closure from an ex. The groom wasn't much better. He disappeared during the bachelor party and was caught trying to hook up with other women and do drugs as one last hurrah before marriage. My boyfriend at the time, now my husband, was part of the bachelor party, and he told me that when they went back to the hotel room to look for the groom, they found evidence of a prostitute and drugs. Apparently, he had been striking out everywhere and figured he'd get whatever he could. When everything came out, my mom actually tried to convince my sister to still go through with the wedding and just get couples counseling. Obviously, that didn't go over well. My dad, however, had already paid for the venue and catering, so we still had a party there. We just didn't invite my sister. My husband and I still call it the non-wedding when we talk about it. Honestly, it was kind of fun. They had dated for 4 years and were engaged for 2, so 6 years total. Less than a year later, the groom married a woman he had been cheating on my sister with during their entire engagement, and he even gave her the same engagement ring my sister had worn for 2 years. Pretty tacky, in my opinion. As for my sister, she ended up marrying the ex she had flown out to see in the first place. Story 7. Unfortunately, the one I know of happened the day after the wedding. It was a huge, beautiful event with over 250 guests. They were mid-20s college sweethearts, and their parents were in the same social circle in their southern town. They were religious, so a big deal was made about the fact that they had waited. On their honeymoon flight the next day, the groom turned to the bride, my older cousin, and said, "This was a mistake." Then he completely shut down and didn't talk to her. They landed in Tahiti, and she immediately flew back home on the next flight. The story goes that he stayed in their honeymoon suite and slept with a bunch of different women, though I can't verify that personally. It's one of those family rumors. A month later, he came crawling back, but by then she was too humiliated. She had spent that entire month returning wedding gifts, writing thank you notes, and dealing with the fallout while he partied. He claimed he wasn't ready and felt pressured. They ended up getting an annulment, and now it's apparently super awkward at alumni events. She's since remarried, has 3 beautiful kids, and is living a much happier life. I guess in a way, he just made room for the right person to come along. It really goes to show, you never know what goes on behind closed doors. What looks perfect from the outside can be completely different for the people in the relationship. Story 8. So this happened to a friend of mine. You know, the kind of friend you really like but aren't super close with. I couldn't make it to her wedding and just wanted to congratulate her afterward. Long story short, her wedding party returned the very night of the wedding because the groom's family, his parents specifically, were demanding more dowry. Both the bride and the groom were doctors. She and her family were relieved that the groom's family showed their true colors before the marriage actually happened. Dowry deaths are sadly very common in our country. She's married now and has the most adorable little daughter. Edit. For context, dowry deaths refer to the tragic cases where brides have been burned to death after marriage. It often happens when the groom's family believes their son could demand a higher dowry, so they see it as an easy way to get rid of the bride and have him remarried. It was so common in India in the 1980s that the government had to pass a law stating that any unnatural death of a married woman within the first 10 years of marriage would automatically be investigated as a dowry death. Many brides are also tortured after marriage to bring in more money from their parents. And to add a bit of cultural context, even though dowry is traditionally associated with Hindu customs, the friend I mentioned is Muslim. I also had a Catholic friend whose marriage was dissolved over dowry demands. Ours is, unfortunately, a country united by misogyny. Story 9. I almost did this myself. 2 days before the wedding, as my bridesmaids were flying into town, my fiancé left his wallet at home. I'd never snooped before, but I opened it up. The very first thing I saw was a bright yellow letter from his ex-wife. It was from when he was deployed. They had a child together, but there was zero mention of the kid in the letter. Granted, I only skimmed it, but the gist was that she knew he loved getting letters, so she was so great for sending him one. I was really upset that it was important enough for him to carry around every day. If it had been in a drawer or a box, I wouldn't have cared as much. But to have it in his wallet, on his person all the time, that stung. I would often write him little notes about what he meant to me and hide them in places, and knowing her letter was in there while none of mine were hurt even more. He's a pretty quiet person and had nothing to say when I asked him about it. I figured I would just go through with the wedding weekend and then not mail in the marriage certificate. But then he completely blew me away with his vows. He knocked it out of the park. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. He even got down on one knee to my daughter, said vows to her, and gave her custom-made earrings. The wedding weekend was an absolute blast, and he seemed so genuinely happy to be marrying me. So I decided I could forgive him. That letter was from a time in his life I couldn't really relate to, but we had built a wonderful blended family, and I wanted to move forward. I mailed the certificate in. We'll celebrate 10 years of marriage this summer. There have been some bumps, mostly that first year, but for the last 4.5 years, I've been very happy, and I'm so glad we're together. Story 10. My ex bailed the day after our wedding. He blamed it on me being anxious during the ceremony, which at the time I thought was just cold feet, but now I realize it was a sign that things weren't right, since he and his family were jerks. He later admitted his parents had been against our interracial relationship from the start, and he had never told me. He had a complete breakdown, got into the shower fully clothed, then sat in his parents' hotel room for hours. Eventually, he came back to our hotel room with his parents and kicked me out, even though my parents had paid for the room. LOL. His mom tried to claim that I was crazy and needed to be admitted to a mental hospital. I saw a psychiatrist in a panic the next day, and she basically said, no, you're fine. But that family definitely sounds like they need help. 4 days later, I still had to move to his city to start residency. On his way back up, he called me apologizing and asked to try again. Like an idiot, I agreed. After a couple of months, though, he broke up with me again. This time because I pointed out that I had made major career sacrifices by choosing a residency program in his city instead of better, more prestigious programs elsewhere. He thought his career should always come first, and that I shouldn't have had any regrets about choosing the program near him, despite everything that had happened. We had never agreed to that. I think he twisted my saying, on our very first date 4 years earlier, that I was open to moving to another city into meaning I'd follow him anywhere. But after that, we had multiple discussions about how we both valued our careers and would take turns making sacrifices. He also insisted we weren't legally married and even accused my family of trying to convert him. Spoiler, I had to go to court to get an annulment. So yeah, he was wrong about that too. Story 11. My husband's mom was left at the altar 3 times by the man he thought was his father. The second time it happened, she went back to her ex-husband for a night, then returned to the man who had left her at the altar and decided to give him another chance. When my husband was born, she didn't tell anyone that his father might actually be someone else. Guess what we found out from DNA testing 30 years later? Anyway, back to the main question. On the 3rd time she was left at the altar, she finally broke up with him. He kicked her and the kids out of the house he had bought from her father, the same house her dad had built with his own hands. My husband, his sister, and their mom were very poor for a few years, but my Emile always made sure they had enough to eat, even if it meant she went hungry. My husband didn't see his dad very often after that, and was actually shocked when we invited him to our wedding. Now, they only talk on the phone about once a year. He's a free spirit who who refuses to be tied down to anyone, and he honestly seems incapable of empathy. He cut off his entire family, and when we visited him for the first time, he left for over 9 hours to go on a mountain bike ride on the very first day and was impatient with our young son. In the end, my husband was relieved to learn this man wasn't his biological father. Today, my MIL has the best husband for her, a very sweet man who is completely over the moon in love with her. Thank God she was left at the altar by someone who threw away the boy he thought was his own flesh and blood and broke her heart over and over until she finally found the strength to leave. I'm convinced that people who leave someone at the altar have no heart or consideration. It's the most dramatic, humiliating, and heartbreaking way to shatter someone, standing before all their friends and relatives, declaring that they aren't good enough after all. There are so many opportunities to end an engagement before the wedding itself. There is simply no reason to break someone like that at the altar. Story 12. Boy, do I have a story. My good friend had a wedding after being with her boyfriend for about 9 years. Their relationship was mostly out of convenience. They didn't really have much in common. On the day of the wedding, she was panicking and saying she didn't want to go through with it. Everyone reassured her that it was just nerves about the big day, so they went ahead with the wedding. Everything seemed normal, but pretty much the day after, she realized she didn't actually want to be with him. They never mailed in their marriage documentation and figured that meant they weren't officially married. A couple of months later, he moved out, and they went their separate ways. About a year later, the ex-boyfriend got a new girlfriend, and they decided to get married. That's when my friend got a text from him saying, "Hey, so it turns out someone else, maybe the officiant, mailed in our documentation, and we're actually married." This all happened in 2019, and just last month, she finally got legally divorced from him. The funny part is that she's been dating someone else for 2 years now and is pregnant with his child. I always joke that she's having a baby with someone who technically isn't her legal husband. Story 13. Not our wedding, but it fits. She wanted me to go with her to a coworker's wedding with literally an hour's notice. Now, I knew the wedding was coming up because she had talked about this guy from work a lot, his upcoming wedding, the details, everything. But she never once indicated that she wanted to go or that she was even invited. I had tickets to a college football game that day. She had known for weeks that I had those tickets and plans to go with my brother-in-law. The morning of the game, she suddenly claimed she was invited to the wedding and insisted I go with her. Of course, being a rational human being, I told her I wasn't going. That kicked off an hour of her screaming at me, threatening to leave me, and calling me names. After about 30 minutes of this, I started packing her things into boxes and asked for the key to the house back. I told her I'd put her stuff on the doorstep. She still left for the wedding. I packed 3 boxes of her things, set them on the porch, and then left for the game. The next day, her sister came to pick up her stuff and informed me that my now ex-girlfriend had interrupted the ceremony during the speak now or forever hold your peace part to confess she loved the groom. He still married the woman in the white dress instead. I can honestly say that guy is smarter than me. He knew better than to stick his dick in crazy. Story 14. My best friend married an airplane pilot. The very next morning, they left for their honeymoon in Southeast Asia. When they landed in Singapore, she got an email from a woman in Colombia who was also engaged to the same guy. Since he frequently flew to Colombia, it made sense. The email included tons of pictures as proof. Apparently, the other woman had only found out because she saw the wedding photos on social media. It was devastating. My friend had to get off the plane, collect her luggage, and face her new husband while crying and arguing. She called her parents, who booked her a different hotel and a flight back for the next day. To make things even worse, she found out 3 weeks later that she was pregnant. So now she has to deal with this jerk for the rest of her life. It's a terrible situation. She is such a lovely person, and she didn't deserve any of it. I sometimes think about how someone's life can be completely wrecked just by choosing the wrong partner, even when there are no obvious red flags. Story 15. A second cousin of mine, British, was a very quiet, nerdy kind of guy who lacked confidence. He got a scholarship and went to college in the US, where he met the woman who would become his wife. As far as I know, she was the only woman he had ever had a romantic relationship with. Her family was very religious. Her dad was some kind of pastor, so they got engaged and married quickly. On their wedding night, she admitted to him that she was a lesbian, that she was in love with her maid of honor, and asked if he would be her cover. What's the female equivalent of a beard? Because her family would disown her if they ever found out. She wanted a loveless, performative marriage, but he thought they were genuinely in love and was completely blindsided. He annulled the marriage, and her family apparently did end up disowning her. It was all spoken about in hushed tones, with my mum and aunties being very British and polite about it. At the time, I was an edgy teenager and thought it was kind of funny, but looking back, he must have been devastated. Story 16. This happened to me. She was 1 semester ahead of me and had already graduated. 3 days before our wedding, a psychopath at her work with a lot of generational money had spent an entire month grooming her. He'd say things like, "Why are you marrying this loser who had to join the military? My family has hundreds of millions." Well, he won. We had been together all through college. It was my last semester. I had my graduation robes hanging in the closet when she just looked over and said, "We're done," packed her stuff, and moved in with Mr. Psychopath. He was a total arrogant POS, too. He'd brag at work about taking home fat chicks on the weekends because they were easy. Real classy. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, I dodged a bullet. But at the time, it was brutal. I had to call everyone on the guest list to tell them the wedding was off, return the gifts people had already sent. Most of them cried when I told them and just said, "Keep it, man." The only small piece of revenge was that she and the guy had to leave the state because so many people were pissed off when they found out what happened. I spent the next 2 weeks drinking myself to sleep. Didn't even think about dating for at least a year. Honestly, it took me 5 years to learn how to trust anyone again. Dating after that sucked because I still carried so much distrust, and it probably ruined some really good chances with people who didn't deserve it. In the end, though, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I went on multiple combat tours, which gave me a whole new perspective on life. I'm now wrapping up a 3rd career, have been with a truly wonderful woman for over 20 years. We own a fully paid-off house, and we have 4 pensions that will comfortably support us for life. We take yearly cruises and travel the world together. But back then, I was really bitter. I honestly came to believe that all women, no matter what they say, will drop you the second someone with a fat bank account and a manipulative, charismatic personality comes along. That experience left me jaded for life. Just look at the Trump/Stormy scandal. It's all about the money. No amount of love or soulmate talk can outweigh the human desire for security when combined with a skilled groomer who's also a psychopath. It was a dark truth I learned the hard way, and it left me with lasting trust issues. Still, when I look at my dedication wall filled with medals, photographs, memorials, and accomplishments, I know that wasn't meant to be my path. I did so much better in the end. I helped thousands of people come home to their families who might not have otherwise. I've stood in places few people ever will, and seen things most wouldn't believe. Somewhere in all of that, I think there was a higher plan at work. I never spoke to her again after that, and I don't want to. I don't even acknowledge her existence out of indifference. The person I loved for 5 years died that day, and I just had to go through the mourning process. Story 17. I tried. I seriously tried. Maybe I should have tried harder. This was with my first wife. She yelled at me the entire night before the wedding. The AC went out in our apartment, and we had 2 floor fans stacked on top of each other. She completely lost it, kicked the fans over at me, and threw a tantrum. The neighbors called the cops, but when they showed up, they only checked her for bruises and never even asked for my side of the story. After the cops left, she told me, "If I wanted you in jail, all I'd have to say is you hit me." So I slept on the couch that night, with no fans, because she took both. The next morning, she left without me to go get ready for the wedding. I woke up and thought, "F this," and went back to sleep. My family later called. I screened their first 50 calls. When I finally answered, they were screaming at me. I told them I wasn't getting married. I should have left home, because sure enough, they showed up and it turned into a whole scene. They downplayed all the red flags I'd seen before. The wedding went on. In the photos, I look absolutely miserable, and she looks like the devil got his crown. That kicked off 7 long years of the same kind of abuse: physical, emotional, mental. There were more incidents with the cops. I'll admit I wasn't perfect back then. I was a lazy young adult. But she never motivated me or supported me. It was just put down after put down, constant tearing me down. Later, when my family heard about all the abuse, their reaction was, "Well, why did you marry her?" Yeah, thanks for that. Edit. We obviously divorced. We both moved on and remarried. I honestly feel bad for the poor guy she married next. As for me, I found a wonderful woman who truly motivates me. Now I have kids, my own house, cars, a boat, land in East Oklahoma, and a much better life. Who you're with can either drag you down or build you up, so don't waste your life with the wrong person. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.